Um, so it sounds like we're having some issues on on the clay process. I think from a big picture, Josh, we just so I don't know what the quantities you had with even like a lemon light or whatever, but we um we need to send about for us to make like a profit, we need to send about 10,000 emails a day.
Yeah.
And we used to send 80,000, but that was to like fucking everybody. And what we found preliminarily with all these improvements, all these kind of curations that like last week, sending 2,500 a day to only Gmail, to decent companies, founders, presidents, marketers, whatever the fuck. No links, only the first email, so no reply. With we haven't rolled out like kind of the custom email for every email with the AI shit, but like tons of spin tax and whatever. That's getting us 2-3% reply rate. And with the amount of positive replies, the amount of setting, we need to send 10,000, at 2,500 a day, it's like enough leading indicator of success. So it's like, oh, okay, we could make some business here, but for our scale, we need to get to that 10,000. So with that said, we at scale, assuming you can email everyone once every 3 months, and kind of that's like a new touch point. Just do the math there, 10,000 weekdays, 200. Yeah, we need like 600,000 emails, right? And Ted was grinding his ass off for the last week. Ted, how many did we squeeze out? I mean, after you clay it, you ZoomInfo enrich it, you never bounce it, whatever. What do we squeeze out? Like maybe 5, 10,000 or something like that.
Yeah, although
Um,
a lot of that was still through a traditional, I mean, we got more quantity out of a traditional Zoom info export, but I ran into a handful of issues in the clay world that I wanted to talk through, but I only actually got, I think, like 2,700 out of clay.
so I guess, yeah, so I guess Josh, from a big picture, it's like we want 600,000 emails. We have the only downside is we already paid for ZoomInfo and we have 600,000 credits. Uh, the assumption was way back in the day that all right, anything out of ZoomInfo is good, which is 60% not the case once you add the Outlook factor. Then once you add extra never bounces, I am open to all options, including I don't know if like I mean maybe you have some data privacy or whatever. Just I don't know if you sell data yourself or if we could just we have to book these calls longer where we're just on play itself and just fucking getting in there and you know uh uh you showing us and just doing it together with you and like I don't know, at the end of the day we need the 5 or 600,000. It could be 200,000 to start. It doesn't have to be all 500,000 in one, but that's kind of the scale and the issue. And I feel like whatever we were doing last time and that process that we kind of had Ted on, it's not it's not obvious to me that that scale is super easy to achieve. So I'm wondering what your input is, and if you have any clients that are sending at that scale. The reason I feel like that scale is required for us is that we don't have we're a service, we're a professional service. Unless you can recommend me some other way, we don't. Our offer is kind of vague and broad and just sort of servicey, and as a result of that, just those are the numbers games that at least are in leading indicators appear that 10,000 emails a day would allow us to kind of set that 6, 7, 8 opportunities because we're roughly one or two a day at 2,500, which at our close rate, the average close rate is about 10%. So it takes 10 opportunities. So you just do the math and our average deal size, you can kind of like reverse engineer the quantity. With the amount of US businesses that are over 30 employees, I think the companies exist. And then if you add multiple contexts of those companies, but I'm just curious what your insight is relative to all of this context.
Yeah, fair enough, Mike. I mean, it was great context because to your point, I mean,
the method by which we're building these tables, there's a lot of caveats there, right? Like having to go to ZoomInfo is what I would call a caveat, right? I would not build it this way. Like, and this is not how I ran Limelight, right? But we have factors in there that then directly impact your ability to kind of replicate to the scale you want. I mean, I would
Yeah,
tell
and
you,
just we're trying to re-engineer around spend we've already allocated, which at this point we're kind of open to just maybe ZoomInfo is just like a write-off. I mean,
Yeah.
we do our best with it, and like it just we do the fuck ton of export and just move on, and
yeah,
we
I
have
mean,
to
I would,
factor in.
you should, yeah, I would export everything in your ICP out of ZoomInfo and then run everything through an ESP checker and take what you end up with. I mean, the
Yeah,
reality is from a grand scheme TAM perspective, your mid-sized to smaller businesses are have a much higher propensity to be Google, right? Then, so as you're pulling stuff out of ZoomInfo and that, then the
yeah.
higher level you go from an enterprise perspective, the more likely you're going to
The
be at
more you're gonna get waste.
Outlook. Yeah.
What? How do?
So
Let's say we didn't have ZoomInfo, and I came to you. I'm like, hey, Josh, I want to get 500,000. How would like? What is the best way to do that? Is
I teach you how to use Apify. I tell you, get an Apollo account. You don't need a $10,000 a month Apollo account. You would need whatever one instance costs. It's like a hundred bucks a person. Because there's basically two levels of like one-off Apollo accounts. There's the one that doesn't give you like revenue data and some of the additional filters. The second one, I think it's like $120 a person, and you can be at the lowest credits because the credits don't matter. But it basically gives you the ability to use all their filters, right? It's ballpark. We have five of them. We pay like $520 a month for it, because you're not paying for credits. And then I would teach you how to use an Apify scraper where you scrape that data from Apollo. And before you wonder if that's ethical or not, just don't forget that Apollo got banned by LinkedIn from scraping LinkedIn's data. So it's perfectly ethical and legal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's built into Apify. And you learn how to scrape leads at $1.20 per thousand leads from Apollo using their filters.
when you say scrape leads, you're scraping email?
You're
The
you're
email.
scraping Apollo. So you're setting up the filters the way you want. You're importing that URL into Apify. And there's a lot of services out there that do this, but we did it through, and we still do it to this day through Apify
So when you're
because
scraping, just so I'm clear, are you scraping free data, or you scrape like the first name, last name company, or are you scraping the email address and phone and all the information?
yeah, all the information. So
Okay.
you're scraping the email. And so what you end up with is an output that, per the same limit in Clay, 50,000 rows, you end up with an output like that you've said only give me verified emails from Apollo. And
Could
then
you, would
and you're
that be
filtering down to
Gmail?
Google. Yeah, you're
Okay,
filtering
so they
down to
have
people who
ESP. Got it.
they don't, I mean, they have technology data, but Gmail is one of those technologies. So is
Wait a second.
Mimecast and Proofpoint,
Why the fuck is Apollo not blocking Apify?
because they can't. The problem is they sold lifetime perpetual licenses to people that then built a whole market around scraping Apollo. And
Uh-huh.
so they just, they uh, contractually, they can't because basically
What
anybody
would be
with
my
those,
total cost? What would be my total cost here? So I get one Apollo license, right?
Apollo license and then
How much is that
a dollar, 100, let's say 120 bucks
per month or
per month. Yeah.
okay. So 120 bucks a month. And
And
then
a
what's the
dollar,
other math?
a dollar 20 per thousand leads.
1,000. So if I want 500 of that, $1.20.
Uh-huh.
Dude, this is making me sick. I mean, like, yeah, that's so cheap. But
And then
but
you still have like your API calls and stuff, but pure
all right.
lead
So talk me
with
through that. So if what do I have to do API calls for the like the million verifier and shit like
yeah,
that?
unfortunately you still have to verify Apollo's emails because
Okay,
they're
so let's
different.
get going. Like fuck. So pretty much, it's clear, guys. We should just speed run our Zoom info export slowly but surely, and just like basically take our L. It's not even going to be an L. It's just going to be inefficient. But it's literally the time. It sounds like if unless Josh is sitting here just sit in front of me in front of the Miami skyline, lying to my face, wherever the fuck he's at. I mean, unless this is a pure lie, a scam. Um,
You want to see
like
it, Mike? Will that make you feel
no.
better?
I'm trolling you.
I know
I
you. I
you
know you
know,
are,
it's
but I
like
can tell you this: I pulled 3 million leads for Lemon Light with the
yeah, like
exact
it, and
process.
like this whole Zoom info thing is just a waste of our time. Like we could just export out a Zoom info and then understand that like what 20 to 30% of it's going to be usable after. What Josh is saying, like maybe focusing on smaller businesses and the export, up to maybe 100 employees is probably going to be more likely to be Gmail or something like that. And maybe there are some like technology filters, but just understand that like ZoomInfo was a 2020 decision, and reality probably was never a good fit for our business. The whole reason I went to ZoomInfo was because I wanted to do cold calling in 2019, and they were the only thing at the time that appeared to be. But I didn't even know about any of this Apify shit or Apollo shit, and if this is real. And so, what's the scale of Apollo? Why does Apify not have the shop ZoomInfo shit? Why is that not the case on ZoomInfo? Why can't you do a ZoomInfo scraper? Not that I would, but
Because
is just ZoomInfo is more sophisticated and they know how to not fucking.
because ZoomInfo wasn't stupid enough to sell perpetual licenses to people that they couldn't later block. If that makes sense.
Oh, great. Okay. All
So
right.
I'm
So,
just giving you a little peace of mind. I still happen to have access to Lemon Light's Apify account, and you can see all the scrapes
Jesus
we've done.
Christ. All right. So, everything we did in the last week and a half, Ted, I think we scrap, right? We just say all the clay table, all that shit that we were doing. Not, what we should use is understand that our ZoomInfo investment is we are going to export out of it and do our best to make use of those exports, but we should just begin to do that and then take them through all the bouncing things, take them through the million verifier thing, treat that as a whole separate process. And then we will just not renew ZoomInfo. And that will be that. So now you guys need to just, Josh, maybe you can show Juan and Ted here this Apify process. Ted, I will personally pay. I'll Venmo you for the Apollo, whatever you need. Let's get the Apollo thing, and then what's the cost of Apify? Oh, is that the
It's
dollar for every
yeah,
thousand
that's the
scraping?
dollar. Yeah, that's the. Let me show you. So the dollar, it's the same thing. It's just billed to the Apify
Josh, is there
account.
any
So
world you would just sell us data?
I don't want to be in the business, honestly.
Okay, that's fine.
Mike, I
That's
have a
fine.
lot
It's
of
so
it. Trust me.
I
I know.
I get it. It's so cheap. We could just get it ourselves, anyways. All
Well,
right.
the thing that's nice about this, to be honest, though, and this is what let me give you a 5 minute process so you
Okay.
understand.
Okay. Okay.
It's not really that complicated. The reason why, I mean, look, we were using the exact same process you've been doing, right? Except to your point, it's overwhelming. We didn't have the Zoom info thing, right? But we moved into this because look, Apollo, everybody has their best database. You can make the argument Zoom info is better than Apollo, Apollo is better than Zoom.
Sure. Sure.
But
Sure.
they're all the same data to some extent, which is all LinkedIn data with email verification, with
Yeah.
email
Yeah.
tools,
Yeah.
and then whatever pipes they have in, like
Yeah.
technology data, revenue. Those are all different providers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Apollo is really clean. Like at the end of the day, it's pretty simple to come in here and go,
We
I want,
almost went with Apollo. It was like so close. There was a few little features that Zoom had that like made it a little bit more intuitive for us. But yeah.
and I would tell you, like every big lead agency and gen agency in the world, we all do this, right? Like there was
How
a
did this LinkedIn scraping affect how good Apollo is?
It didn't have one effect on our ability to scrape Apollo. It
Yeah,
had
but
the
does
effect
it
that it,
change the value of Apollo's data?
it's hard to answer that question because they haven't stopped scraping LinkedIn. So
Okay.
they're I can tell you this, like that will come to head at some point. Like, but Apollo has clearly made the decision they don't care because you can download their scraper right now off their website. So
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's probably more of like a lawsuit thing between them because in the public domain, the argument is whether LinkedIn data is public data. I would say it's
Mhm.
clearly not, but there's a lawsuit out there that somebody won against LinkedIn that said it is, and I think Apollo's, drawing. I think Apollo's Sequoia backed, right? So they're one of the big backers, right? So somebody's drawing a line in the sand and saying, "Who cares if you take our LinkedIn page down? We're not taking our scraper down." But
Mhm.
all that is to say is that look, they still have hundreds of millions of leads. They have amazing filters. You can pull a lead list like I did in this one, Mike, and you're seeing my screen, right? Just make
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
You can pull, like, let's say you want to run lookalike audiences or do something and get domains from somewhere else. You can drop those domains into Apollo and then still get the leads you want
Got it.
from
Got
just
it.
those domains. They have technology data. You see my filter has Gmail on it
And this
right
is all
now.
in the $120 for one user package, and then you could just run Apify and scrape that.
Exactly. You basically set up your filter the way
How
you want.
long? How long is that viable? How long until Apify? Is it like how long has this been happening, or how long have you been able to do this? And do you feel this is a long-term solution?
I feel like this guy right here who built, so there's, if you go to Apify, there's a bunch of Apollo scrapers.
Yeah,
This is the only one that you can do up to 50,000 leads. The others are 5,000 capped, and the others
up
are
to 50,000 for one search, or
for one scrape. You see these scrapes are like
got it. So
10,000,
I could run like a lot of scrapes, basically.
yeah, I did 44,000 on this one. Well,
So
actually,
someone from Apollo sold this guy Code Pioneer a fucking user,
yeah, a
and then
perpetual license.
because it's on this, so does Apollo just try to keep this as low key? Like, do a lot of people know about this? I feel like I've not seen anything about this in like cold email Reddit, or like maybe I have, but I
Well,
just glossed
well,
over it. Or
because none of us want to go out and remind Apollo that but like there's 7,300 users of this.
yeah,
They know. Your API doesn't get hit
these are
this
the
many
ultra
times.
scam. These are the ultra spammers of the internet right here.
No. The ultra spammers of the internet are the guys that sell this data on Facebook and that you can
Okay,
ping
okay,
and
okay.
that
Yeah, yeah,
they're all in the same area of the world that he probably is, but
yeah,
they give you 1,000 leads for $10. Those are what I'd call the ultra spammers. These this when this first came out, there were like 10 users. I was one of the first 10, believe it or not. Now there's 7,300. If this guy for these 7,300 users only scrapes $1 each, he's making 7,300. This guy's livelihood depends on keeping
got
this
it. So
up.
Code Pioneer makes $1.20.
I mean, Apify probably gets some of that cut,
Yeah, so
right?
the
To be
Code
fair,
Pioneer has a huge incentive to keep this fucking going, and so does Apify. And
yes, and they
Apollo would
do
have to like break their contract with
with him.
Code
And they
Pioneer.
look, I'm telling you, there's like 10 different websites that do exactly this, that they scrape it themselves without Apify. More, this guy made it easier for companies like us. And Apify is not a small shop. Like if you go into their apps, they do everything. I mean, Facebook, TikTok, all they've done, YouTube, LinkedIn, which I don't even know if any of these still work, but they, I mean, if you look at some of these, like 24,000 users, 86,000 users,
Yeah, yeah,
93,
yeah. Got it, got it.
they're not small
So
anymore,
this is a
right?
platform. If people build code that I can lease for these little projects that they have hacked into the platforms to get me information, and I just pay per whatever 1,000 or 100 or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call it like, I wouldn't even say it's hacking. Like at the end of the day, they're just rebuilding. They're doing everything Clay and Zapier and Meg. They're
Yeah,
rebuilding API calls into apps. They call them actors in Apify, but they're just apps that they've done all
yeah,
the API work for you, right? What these guys have that are unique in some of these instances, like this Apollo guy, is he has the ability to transmit all this through his API keys and not have Apollo shut it down. You can't,
got it. All right,
I
Leah,
mean,
let, let's let's set up how we do this. This seems like it's
so
the right thing to do.
yeah, and we use all kinds of Apify tools. I mean, you can
Would
see,
this is what you would have recommended should we had not came to you before with like our requirements around ZoomInfo?
I would tell you this is the only way known to man to pull as many leads as
The
you want
quantity. Got it. Got it.
in
Okay.
any kind of success without, there's other ways, right? You could pay ZoomInfo $10,000 or $20,000 a month, right? And
Yeah.
accomplish the same thing. But
With a bunch of
that,
waste. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the problem with the big vendors like Apollo and ZoomInfo. You can have huge contracts to get this data. You're still not going to overcome the Outlook issue, and you're not going to overcome that they have big data, and 30% of it, those emails won't validate.
All right. So let's take the rest of this. What's your flexibility today? Do you have more time after this call if we run over?
Let me see. I think I do have another. Let me look.
Juan, well, how do you feel about just, I mean, what we're talking about?
Good. The only thing is, for our, yeah, I guess we just need to learn more and see how long it would take to get this set up.
It doesn't take long at all. So the biggest things, number one, get the Apollo account, and let's go in and look. We're recording this call too, right? So I'll send you the recording. Like if you just do what you did last time, Juan, and remind me.
We are. Juan, do we still have? We may still have our Apollo account. I'm gonna try and log in.
Yeah, there it is. So you need. I have 6 users. It costs $354 a month. So I'm just trying to see what the sign up is, but I'm paying basically like $80 per user. So whatever one is, let me see if
Something like that. Yeah.
it's this one. You need this basic one because this free one, you can get a free account, but with this basic one, you get all the other intent data, job changes, advanced filters. That's what you need. So it's cheaper than I told you, Mike. It's $59 a month.
All right,
Okay.
Ted. So you want to grab the basic account.
Okay. Once you
Juan,
have
you want to
that,
just write out these steps? I know he'll
Yeah,
record
I'm
it, but
writing
like,
it out now.
okay, step one, basic account. Step two,
there's two types of searches you can do. Company, right? And just like any other tool, these are all your filters. You choose your filters. And if you do company, like you want to look for a list of companies first, then you just select all. Like I have 2,750 companies here. I select them, select all, apply. And then I can turn that into a people search by hitting find people at these 2,700 companies. That makes sense?
okay. So company search, select all, and then find people at company.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So Juan, you writing that down?
Yeah, similar to
Okay.
Clay.
Yep.
Or you can just do people searches and then you filter down, I like the persona thing is nice because if you build a persona, like the exact setup you like, then you can save them so you don't have to come back and do the filters every time. So you can see all the personas I've built. Email status, use verified. If you want to, you can also use unverified. It'll give you a few more. So like in this scenario, it gave me about an additional 10%. But these 3,000 are much less likely to verify. So it's really kind of a personal choice. That makes sense. Like a vast majority. So Apollo has their own verification. I would just tell you, I've tested it to the nth degree. It's still off about 20%. So I just choose the verifieds because most of these are off. They're already telling me they're not going to verify. You're not going to pick up that many. So I use just verified and then make sure you include catch-alls because we're using Bounceman, if you remember. And so we're going to have that in our process to verify those catch-alls anyway.
Got it. So we select email status and then verified.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one more thing about this. If you want to use the enrichment tools in Clay to find emails, then obviously you don't have to check verified. It's going to give you everybody without an email. See how that number jumped to 48,000? So it depends. For
Which
you guys,
what
I don't
yeah,
think you need to do that. If you had a small TAM and
like
you need,
yeah.
you know what I mean? You needed to find people, but your guys' TAM is big enough where I just don't think you need to do it. But that is an option. You could just
Yeah.
say, show me everybody. And then, like, this is a list of just home builders. You can get really good at building out industry data. Just remember, Apollo's industries are similar to LinkedIn's. But if you want to drill further, you can do searches, exclude these industries, use these keywords, etc. These are all, do they include this keyword in their social media or SEO? So these are some of the things you don't have in Clay that you would have in Apollo, and drilling down to your ICP. Again, for you guys, I'd be like, let's go in and pull real estate, let's pull uh, buying intent. I've tested it many times. I've never seen it add value, but I would come down to, let's just say we were pulling a list for you guys for real estate. I'd come down to revenue data is good, but remember it's sparsely populated, if that makes sense. So I'd care more about like employee count, like you talked about, like where it's like, give me everybody that's, in this range,
Yeah.
right? And you see how big our list got really, really quick, right? And then again, you can further filter down funding, revenue, etc. But in a nutshell, the only other thing I would add here is technologies, and go Gmail. I'd go Mimecast,
Turn that hour on.
Yep.
and I'd go Proofpoint. These are the three that are definitively in there, and we definitively send to every single day.
You would still ESP check those, but you're just pulling the list based on that as a start.
I would, only because ESP checking is free, right?
Right.
It didn't cost you anything. And there's a staleness to this data. So sometimes people switch providers, stuff like that. So I run it through the ESP checker, but if you use these three technology filters, your initial match rate is going to be close to 95%.
Right. So essentially once you've gotten a list and you've gone through all the steps you're going to continue to take us through, you'd still put this back through Clay. You'd still run it through the ESP check, the verification, etc.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only thing you're now changing about your process is how you're getting the data, because in the Clay tables, and you're going to see this in a minute, it's not that hard to put this once it runs into Clay, because Clay has a built-in Apify actor.
And I was going to show you this, and we still can. We've attempted to build suppression into Clay. Would that be your recommendation rather than trying to put suppress existing context in this Apollo process, or what do you think is?
Yeah, so that is a limitation, and with this scraper,
Okay.
is that Apollo only allows you to import. So you can import domains to say only search these companies. You can't take like an existing list of, let's just say, 30,000 clients, for example, and upload it and say exclude these.
So
You can, but then the scraper doesn't work. So
Gotcha. So in this workflow, you would suggest that we go ahead and build a list, do the scraper, and then we can we can check it against the suppression lists in Clay.
and Clay, yeah, do a lookup from the Clay column. I mean, when you're running this kind of volume, it's the problem head with that. Remember we talked about this last time, is like how long it takes to look up a big table in Clay.
Yeah.
I took the approach is I just added the suppression list to instantly. And if, every 20,000 emails I hit a client and I had to pay for their email again, then it was not worth the effort of waiting for the Clay table to look up every single lead.
Gotcha.
What about oh, so I guess you took the same approach for people who responded to your emails and whatnot, like
You mean
unsubscribe.
Yeah. So like you basically can use your suppression list as instantly as it's if you when you get a reply and you add them to the block list and instantly, right,
Right.
from the Unibox, it's going to add them to that list anyway, right? So that becomes a running list of everybody you ever get a reply from that says unsubscribe. And then you can go in and add your clients to that list. And now you have a dual suppression list of your clients and anybody that's said unsubscribe. And so, yes, you're going to pull those leads accidentally twice somewhere down the road. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to go and add them to instantly in the Clay workflow, and then it's not going to add because they're on the block list. And that's
So
for me, I was like, that happening one every 10,000 leads was not worth doing a lookup to all 10,000 leads.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And so you don't really have a sense of how many you have until they're scheduled, but you're saying that it's a small portion and worth it because of the way
It's a
Clay.
real problem, one, if you have 10,000 leads in your TAM. If you're going to send this many emails every month, some things aren't just worth the effort, to be honest with you, or the
Mhm.
slowness of the Clay table. Like, as long as you end up blocking them, maybe it's at the very end of your workflow. Because what I had to learn in this process, one, is like I run 20 plus other clients at any given time, and the most any of them send is 100,000. When you get to this size where you're doing 10 times that, there's very few people that have ever done this way, number one. And number two, you kind of figure out like, okay, everything is a give and take. Like as long as I never send an email to those clients, I don't really care. I don't want to slow down a play table, and every single play table I built has to do 50,000 lookups.
Yeah. No, I know Ted and I witnessed that this week for sure. So that makes sense.
But it's good because it's part of it is you're going to evolve and make those changes and go, look, you can make the same argument for what I just showed you here, right? Like if this gets me 95% of the way there, do I want to run 50,000 ESP checks if the end result of that is only excluding 5% of a list of 50,000 from Outlook, right? Like maybe it is, right? But those are choices you make along the way to say like, well, maybe I'll just send at 10% of the outlooks and monitor those stats and instantly. And if I'm, starting to see some replies, like that's my motive that maybe I can pull more outlooks, that's
Hmm.
everything is relative, right? But on the other side of it, if you do that for a week and you have 5,000 out of 50 that are outlook and you go into instantly and you filter by ESP and not one of them have replied, then maybe that ESP check in every table is worth it.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's just say this was your list. It's too big. So you got to remember, you got to at least get it below 50,000. So I'm going to take some of these off. And this is where those personas come into play. Or the other thing you can do is you can save all of these as views, right? So let's just say I did this list today. I can save it as a new search and we can do, we can just call it, and the date and whatever, today is the 15th, tax day. I guess we all know what day it is. And then spell your name right, but I can save it. And then next time I go to do a search, I can just look at all these searches I've done. Right. So I can start where I left off. So it's not like you're coming back in and say, okay, well, this time I'm going to add, this employee count. And that I can see right away. If I add this group, it's going to add 55,000 leads to my list. It's just some of the navigational things and that makes this easier.
And how were you do you cast a wide net and send to like non-decision makers, what we would call them, like, people that may not be the ideal target, but are you doing that to meet scale at all?
Yeah. I mean, so this is kind of for you guys, this is the kind of the list I would have, this is kind of the roles that I was targeting.
And did you find that was sufficient? Or
I think
did you?
the one that's a little tricky is if you add in director into here because director is such a broad title that you get like director of IT, right? So, that's the only one that I really would, kind of go back and forth on because you have a commodity product, right? So they fit all of these different categories. And then you may be like, for you guys, you're like, I got plenty of leads in this aspect. So maybe I'll just stick with creative, brand, social media, marketing, advertising, some of these top ones. But then as you get into, again, employee size matters, because if you go 11 to 20, then reaching out to the CEO and the founder is important. If you go to 5,000 to 10,000, then you're not going to get anything ever back from the CEO, right? So you tweak your filters in relevance to the job titles that you're targeting, but this is kind of the broad spectrum I would pull if I was going very broad.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So from there, and and I'll give you comparisons. So like something that's the total opposite of that is like, you can see this is for a different client. So it's much more drilled down, right? What I liked about these personas is you could plug in the industries and save them, your searches, the employee counts. And so it made it easy if you were just let's just say you were going to switch. Like I left industry blank, but I always had the same job title targets, always had the same employee counts. I could literally save a persona for each one if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes navigating this so much easier because you're not having to go through every time and just choose all these different, filters. So you got a list. Let's say this is your list. You take this URL that's right here. You highlight it, copy it. You go to the Apify actor. Let me get into my own account here. And you can see, we're running them pretty much all the time, even today. And you want to there's a lot of Apollo scrapers in there. So make sure it's the one from Code Crafter or Code Pioneer. And then it says Apollo scraper. I can tell you how important this guy is to to Apify, that because we're such a big user, that they reached out to us and tried to schedule a meeting like 2 days before he raised his price from $1 to $1.20 lead. So they obviously if he's not doing this alone, I think they're helping him make sure that this stays up. So that gave me a little bit of peace of mind. And what I like about it too, he's made it better. Like he's added additional data into it that he used to not be able to scrape. But long story short, you take that link and you paste it here where it says search URL. You can even toggle on get personal emails. I leave it off because we don't use them. And then you would just hit save and start. And I'm going to show you. I'll stop it in a second, but it's going to start scraping them one by one. So a list of 50,000 for context probably takes about 2.5 hours to run, just to give you a ballpark of how long they run. 10,000 is probably like 20, 30 minutes. So it's kind of in that ballpark.
How long was that first one you said?
For a list of 50,000 leads, it would probably take about 2.5 hours on average.
Okay.
So you're kind of watching it like it's done 200 already in the first, 20 seconds or so. If you math that out, my experience is we can look at some of our other ones, but that's about how long it takes to run. So I'm going to abort this real quick, and then I'm going to show you some of our runs here. So like we did this one today of 11,000, and it took 38 minutes. So that kind of gives you a ballpark. Once it runs, you can export it a couple different ways. You can output it if you want to CSV, and it gives you a whole bunch of data, right? So I'm just showing you some of it, but it's what I really like about it. You're going to get things like the person's LinkedIn, the company's LinkedIn, market cap, a lot of it's a ton of information. I'll show you just a second in Clay. But some of this is even nested, like you're not seeing all of it, but it's a lot of info.
Mm-hmm.
And you can export this to Excel. We don't, we drop it straight into Clay, but you have that option. Like if you wanted to manipulate it further, you can just export it into Excel. In Clay, I'm going to create a new table. We'll just call it Apify. And to import that data, so you got to actually create a table, and you say import. Where is it? You just got to find it. It's in here. Apify. Right here. See where it says Apify on the integrations.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have an account yet, but once you set up an account, you'll basically just add your account the same way you've added other things. Like you log in, and you may have to paste your API key, which is in your Apify settings. But once you have that integration set up, and I'll just move to one of my tables so I can show you. Which one that we did recently? One maybe in there. This one we're doing right now. And so he might have just imported this, but I'm going to show you in this table too. So same way you find Apify, and when your account's connected, you hit continue. And then and this is nice because if you want to experiment with different types of lead generation, like you want to scrape all these different things we've scraped over time, you can, and it all works the same way. It doesn't matter if it's Apollo or whatever. But you would find that Apollo scraper. So it's apollo.io scraper, the bottom one here. And the trick is you get data from a specific run. So it's this bottom option right here, get data from a specific run. And then all your runs are going to appear. Like you can see how often we use this. It's ridiculous.
Are you able to rename them, or it's always by date?
It's always by date. But the one thing you look at, unfortunately, this is just a feed from Apify's API. But look at the date. So like how I find them is, and I just want to make sure I pull them in because it's going to drop 50,000 leads in there, or however many I pulled. You just check. I always check the time. So like 16:39:04, and then if I go back and look at my runs, I look for the one. See how this one right here, 9:39.
Okay.
That's how I find it to make sure I import the right one.
Okay.
So let me get back. I don't want to import it to this table because it's a live table, but I'm gonna put it in a blank table and show you how easy it is. So new workbook, add. And then one of the other cool things once you get comfortable with this with Apify is like Apify can scrape Crunchbase. It can scrape a lot of different things. And so I'm showing you how to import a bulk list that you run from Apify. But there's an Apify actor that you could put on like each individual row if you wanted to find their Instagram, for example, or see what they have in Crunchbase or check their LinkedIn. So this is like the bulk import way, but just keep in mind Apify is pretty easy to use for other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just, like I just showed you, I'm going to pull in this latest list. I don't even know how big it is, but we're just going to run it. And I'm going to show you. So that's how quickly you can already see it populating the table. And then you see all the data here. It's just,
I see. Then you would just
great.
select the colors you wanted to be in column.
Yeah. See name. I mean, and the nice thing is you only have to set this up the first time, right?
That's so much cleaner than any export I've seen from the big ones.
It's good, man. And there's some really good data in here. So like LinkedIn profile, if you go under organization here, there's all this organization data, like their Twitter, their website, which I want, their company LinkedIn profile. And what's nice is if you have all this data, then you don't have to pay Clay to get it, right? So like I already have their LinkedIn profile. You obviously want to label them good, but you know, you can label them whatever you want. But I have the person's profile, the company's profile here. I have their job titles, states, and you see now. To be fair, sometimes like I haven't seen one yet, but sometimes like this one, the email, it's not perfect. I won't tell you like it's perfect, but do you see how many of these I have emails for? I mean, it's very few that are missing. And then this is what you put into your existing tables. So even in your existing tables that you guys have, you can like, let me explain it this way. So let's say this table wasn't here and we called it email. I could take this Apify record right here, find the email, which is here, and I can just map it to that existing column just as easy. So I don't have to create it as a new column. And you see how it populated that column with all the emails?
Mm-hmm.
So in your existing tables, you don't have to rebuild them all. Just import this Apify actor and then point these values to the columns that are already in your table.
Okay. Map to an existing. Okay.
Yeah. So like you've already built tables based off LinkedIn. You don't have to rebuild them all. You just need to add the Apify actor into those existing tables and then map the data to those columns you already have. And then if you don't have a column, like let's just say you don't have estimated numbers of employee, then add it as a new column like that. And
I'm
now
not following what you're suggesting here. So you're saying like we already have some tables, but those tables are mostly experimental and mostly based on like finding people through Clay. So why wouldn't we start with a new table and just bring in the Apify records and add columns that way? I'm not clear on.
yeah, you can, Ted, but do you remember how you built out your tables with like ESP checkers and million
Yeah.
verifier and balance band and all that? So if you start from scratch, you're going to have to do all this that I just did and then add those one by one, right?
Cool. Right.
If I go to your,
But if you went into, well, yeah, because you can't access that Apify record from our account. But if you theoretically, are you saying that I could come into this table and I could add a column that was based on that Apify scrape into an
yeah,
existing? Okay,
you could. Yeah. So you can, so where it says actions, Ted, import,
I see.
you can add
Oh, it's the
Apify
same thing.
here.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
And
cool,
it's
cool.
identical to this. See how this was from LinkedIn and it's the
Correct.
same thing. It has all these nested values in it.
Got it.
And the Apify will be the same one. And the only difference is when you have the Apify, you can just point it to any of these other columns, and it's the same data. That's the thing. You're going to have domain, country, location, type, industry, description. So you just map them to these columns, except now you're not going to have to rebuild all the other stuff you have already built in that table.
Got it. Okay.
That will save you a lot of time. And just rebuilding tables if you because you guys have put a lot of work into it. And then what you're going to see is just you're going to cut your costs, but the other thing you're going to do too is you're going to see that my experience is around 70, give or take, 70% of emails will verify either through Million Verifier and Bounce Band. So that not having to find the emails, not having to go through ZoomInfo. I mean, we built tables for 22 weeks of, you know, what it took us about 4 or 5 tables of 50,000 rows each with verified emails to get there. Sometimes three, 3 or 4 tables. So you're building 3 tables, 4 tables with big Apify scrapes. And these tables, once you build them once, the first time, then you're just going to copy those tables, import different Apify actors into them, and you're going to set those tables to be automatically run. And so it's the Apify actor import that's going to kick them off. The ESP check will run automatically. Your add to campaign will run automatically. More than anything with this kind of scale, you pay attention more to, screwing up, adding too many leads instantly, or like something not working. That's where you got to really start to pay attention to. I would always make sure my table was turned off. Like I would turn this off, this auto update here, and do 15 or 20 all the way to the end before I turn the table back on and let it all run. That's, believe it or not, that's really it. It's Apollo to that actor into Clay. And just I would say start with a small search. Do 15 or 20, drop them in a table, map the table the way you want, and then let me go back to my Apify for a second. This is the beauty of it too. It works just like the LinkedIn in the sense that trying to find the table I just created.
While you're doing this, Josh, I think this has the potential. It sounds like based on your history, it should eliminate the first 3 or 4 issues that we've been having since our last call, which is awesome. Because I think, first of all, we were having problems with quantity, both in terms of like getting email verification from initial find people searches. We were having issues with like some of the Clay table, the time to do all the updates there. So this addresses all of those challenges. I think if we go ahead and get set up on all the stuff you took us through to date, I think we have a pretty good table set up with some of the, like the suppression check, the ESP check worked fine. The suppression checks worked. The verification ones I think are okay, but I think it would be one more little working session with you on a sample Clay table and making sure we've got all of those formulas built right, because a couple of them I think are pointing to invalid columns, just the way we saved them as templates and then brought them into a work table. So I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, and I would tell you, like, too, honestly, like Mike talked about in the beginning, like right now you're still in the phase of how do I get enough leads to send this much volume?
Right.
Haven't even touched the how do I create copies that gets results.
No,
Right.
100%. But even just building in like the couple of enrichment things around, like making sure well, I guess if we could take out suppression, maybe we just deal with that instantly. But I think even the million verifier, well, actually, I think we did get those to work, right, Juan?
Yeah, we got most of them to work. I think with the domain one, we were having some issues.
Yeah,
The domain level.
but we could, if we're gonna do
But with this, you don't need to do that. You
yeah,
won't need to do that.
yeah, if we're gonna basically just use instantly in our campaigns as the suppression check, then we wouldn't even need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the driving factor you want to think about, though, and you don't realize this until you send this kind of scale, is everything becomes magnified, right? So spam detection becomes extremely magnified. And you have to really start thinking about, like, do I have, and it sounds crazy, but do I have spin tax signatures? Do I have 100 or as close as I can unique subject lines? Because it's just the element of, in a typical campaign, like my typical clients, we're sending 1,000 emails a day with the same signature or the same subject line. We've moved to now where we don't even send the same subject line anymore on every single email.
We have
and we create
we have spin tax on signature, unsubscribe, sentence. However, we could probably, like, basically what happened instantly, we had on the automatic thing where it picked one of the variants and went with that.
Mhm.
Auto optimize or something. And we didn't realize it, but then we looked back and it just, from the beginning, it picked one of them and just sent all 7, that it had tested maybe 10 emails on a bunch. And then before you know it, it was sending almost everything to one of them that was performing the best. And we didn't know if we should shut that off, because when you shut that off, it gives more variation. But when we did that, we saw results. Maybe is this related to something else? So maybe it's correlated, not cause. But how do you approach that? Do you just like value variance? Because we found the more variance you add, the less human it sounds. By the time you're adding spin tax and spin tax and spin tax, is the value of like maximum variance better than sort of optimizing for a single variant?
I don't use spin tax.
Okay.
other than the subject line and the opt-out, meaning that
Got
excuse me, not the subject line, the opt-out and the signature. Every single email copy and subject line is 100%.
So right
Some
now,
very
that's
unique.
a risk that we're holding on to based upon not having this clay stuff set up.
I mean, I think you're going to get close in the sense that you've already shown to some extent of volume you can get 2-3%, right? And that's better than most. That means your copy's good, etc. Right? That would be a well-performing campaign for most people. I think the scale magnifies that because now it's like 10 times the amount of subject lines going out for Google's AI to read that are the same. So you just have to. That's what we would see. In the beginning, these campaigns would be great with newer email accounts, but because of our scale, until we shifted to 100% unique subject lines and 100% unique copy, there wasn't enough variation because we were saying the word limit light too many times.
Got it. Okay, well, let's get this. So, guys, what's the next step? Can we get this Apify
Yeah, I think
process set up? And then it sounds like we could just treat ZoomInfo as like, hey, we spent 20K for the year. We're going to be able to export 600,000 and probably 150,000 of that's or 100,000 of that's going to be usable.
Yeah, I think the ZoomInfo, I'll just come back to in a couple of weeks and we'll start doing some exports here just to complement. But I think next step is set up Apollo, set up Apify, do get as Josh said, maybe a 10 or 15,000, list built, scrape, get it into a clay table and try to get at least do a good test run over the next handful of days to fill in some of our near-term data. I mean, we've got a couple weeks before we get to the scale that we're talking about. So we can continue to, get into some of the
I lost Ted.
Yeah, Ted, you broke up.
Same.
All right.
I'm calling him.
All right.
Hey, Ted, I've got you here on speaker with everybody just because it cut out.
I'm sorry, did I just kick out?
Yeah.
I was talking and then all of a sudden everything was gone. Yeah, I don't know what you heard. I think that we'll get Apollo set up. We'll get Apify set up, and we'll do like an initial, data scrape of maybe 10 or 15,000 just to get the process started. Get that into a clay table for, the things that we need to run short term, and at least get a good sampling. And then we've got a couple weeks before we're going to start increasing our our volume to the point where we need to start varying subject lines and stuff further. So I think we have some runway for that, but I think this makes sense to get on ASAP for at least near term data and try to figure out the process. I think that if we can get I know the video you sent last time, Josh, was great. If we can get this again, I think I took good notes. One, you did too. We can, I think, at least get it started, and maybe then, Josh, I can, reach out in the next couple of days if I've got any questions or I need you to help double check anything.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.